Welcome to the Scottish Rite Journal Podcast, an audio presentation of the Scottish Rite Journal, brought to you by the Supreme Council of the Scottish Rite, Southern Jurisdiction, Mother Supreme Council of the World. This week's article is Conducting Research at the House of the Temple for the Quatuor Coronati Conference by Dr. John Kyle Day, 32nd degree, and comes from the March-April 2023 issue of the Scottish Rite Journal. This past June 24th through 27th, 2022, I traveled to Washington, D.C. to work upon my current project on the reformation of Freemasonry in the former states of the Confederacy, particularly Arkansas, in the aftermath of the American Civil War. Our alacritous staff at the House of the Temple were most cordial in helping me fulfill my plethora of research requests. While at the House of the Temple, I used various 19th century records of transactions of the Supreme Council of the 33rd degree for the Southern Jurisdiction of the United States of America, the proceedings of the Grand Royal Arch Chapter of the State of Arkansas, the proceedings of the Grand Lodge of the State of Arkansas, Grand Commandery, Knights Templar, Arkansas, and the proceedings of Royal and Select Masters, Grand Council of Arkansas. In the early 20th century, the Grand Lodge of Arkansas, free and accepted Masons, suffered a major fire which tragically destroyed much of the prior history of our Grand Lodge and concordant bodies. I began my research looking to the Grand Lodge of England's 1723 constitutions, a seminal treasure of the Enlightenment. The constitutions were a primary impetus for the dissemination of Enlightenment-based principles throughout the 18th century Atlantic world: religious tolerance, meritocracy, interpersonal civility, scientific and artistic education, and societal and personal improvement. By the mid-1800s, these Enlightenment principles were also clearly articulated and applied in the permeation of Prince Hall Freemasonry during the eras of the American Civil War, Reconstruction, and subsequent developments in African American history. Within the states of the former Confederacy, as well as the Western frontier, the establishment of Prince Hall Freemasonry was a crucial important civic institution for the freedmen and their families, ranking alongside that of family and religious life. The freedmen who became Prince Hall Brethren after the Civil War were at the vanguard for the construction of black civil society, creating autonomous, free, and independent communities, thereby aspiring to political, economic, and legal rights earned in the aftermath of the collapse of American slavery. The newly created Prince Hall Lodges of the South quickly became the premier black social fraternity after the Civil War, 1861 to 1865, attracting leading members of the black bourgeoisie, while local lodges became keystones of the rural and urban black communities they served. The leadership of the Arkansas Grand Lodge worked contemporaneously with their Prince Hall brethren in the public square to rebuild the state from the devastation of the American Civil War. Indeed, African American and Caucasian Freemasons used the valuable tools of the aforementioned 1723 constitutions to create and implement such unprecedented measures in the South as the reformation of the Republican Party and the founding of public institutions of higher education, as well as the encouragement and support of migration and economic development. This generation of American Masons, both African American and Northern carpetbaggers, was cosmopolitan, relatively erudite, democratic, devout, and entrepreneurial. This project will research how Arkansas black Freemasons as well as white carpetbagger Freemasons worked contemporaneously in the transfiguration of Southern society during the Civil War and Reconstruction. I will be presenting my research at the forthcoming Quatuor Coronati Research Lodge Conference, Inventing the Future, the 1723 Constitutions, to be held at Queen's College, University of Cambridge, England, September 22nd through 24th, 2023. My research and time at the House of the Temple have proved invaluable to that end. As an added feature to this Scottish Rite Journal podcast, I had the privilege to speak with Brother John regarding his article. Hope you enjoy it. So much of post-Civil War seems to focus on a great deal of negative aspects of American history. Was there any difficulty in locating resources that contain a great deal of positive information regarding Reformation of the South along with Freemasonry?
Yes. You just have to be creative in some of your sources. Working at the House of the Temple was critical to my research because I think, as I mentioned in my article, the Grand Lodge of Arkansas had a fire in the early 20th century. So our records of the 19th century are rather scarce. But you can do a lot of connecting of the dots and be a little creative if you know that prominent men are active in Freemasonry, active Freemasons, and then you can look at their public careers. That's kind of the angle that I've been approaching and so forth. A lot of my colleagues in academe, they point out the fact that it's very hard to study secret societies because it's hard to get records and so forth, and we don't a lot of Freemasonry is oral communication and so forth. So it is difficult, but I think if you get creative with, looking at existing documents in a different angle, and certainly, being an active Freemason myself, that's helped me a lot. But you can find some things. But I'm just starting this project, so I've got a lot left to look at for sure.
And the ideas and ideals of the Enlightenment period seem to certainly center around a more hopeful and long-term mentality as opposed to the realism period. And it was more of a focus on the there and now, for lack of a better term. Was it a tough sell on the long haul positive change, for people, Masons and non-Masons alike, post-Civil War?
What I am finding, and I think that a lot of historians of the Reconstruction era have not really addressed yet, and that's why I think some of my research is a bit innovative. Is that we talk about the Freemasonry being a chief vehicle of the Enlightenment. Margaret Jacobs' classic work that showed how things like interpersonal civility, speaking in public, learning how to vote, religious toleration, all these basic principles of the Enlightenment were kind of came through Blue Lodges in the Atlantic world. I'm finding the same thing during Reconstruction and during the Reconstruction era, particularly amongst African Americans in the South, through the establishment of Prince Hall lodges, particularly in the Trans-Mississippi West, places like Missouri, Arkansas, Mississippi, and Tennessee. That you have a lot of African American leaders who are also prominent in Freemasonry. Many of them had not been able to achieve a college education, but that they are active in Freemasonry, and a lot of the educational tools, working tools that we use on a regular basis. I see a similar process of what happened during, say, the 18th century in Revolutionary America as happening in Black communities throughout the South. You see in a lot of these both rural and urban communities, you see the establishment of churches, you see the establishment of Prince Hall lodges in these African American communities, and I'm finding that it's a critical tool of this transformation from slavery to freedom.
This was obviously a super deep dive in research of a topic. Was there any particular reference that was especially eye-opening to you, and why?
Yes. One of my main classes that I do profess here at the University of Arkansas at Monticello is Arkansas history. And I again very interested in the Reconstruction era, and have found a lot of historians conclude that Arkansas is among the most radical areas for Reconstruction. It has one of the most radical constitutions. It is very far-reaching in the establishment of public education. The Republican Party takes a very firm grip over the state during Reconstruction. The Democratic Party does not reemerge in Arkansas until the 1870s. I quickly found that a number of Republican leaders were not only active Freemasons, but they were, at least in the public sphere, they were working directly alongside a lot of African American leaders who were active in the Prince Hall Lodge. You see, for example, there's a group of three brothers, the Clayton brothers, who were originally from Pennsylvania. Two of these brothers, John Clayton and William Henry Harrison Clayton, they serve in the Army of the Potomac in Virginia, and then they later joined their older brother Powell Clayton in the state in the 1860s. John Clayton is first elected sheriff of Jefferson County, which is the county seat is Pine Bluff, Arkansas. It's a majority African American town, but it's kind of a Wild West atmosphere with the railroad coming in and a lot of in-migration. He's elected sheriff for over 10 years in Pine Bluff, largely with the support of African Americans, and many of the leaders there are active in the Prince Hall Lodge. He's a founding member of Pine Bluff 69, which is a lodge that's still meeting today. His brother, William Henry Harrison Clayton, who later serves as Grand Master of Arkansas, he becomes U.S. Attorney for the Western District of Arkansas in the 1870s, 1880s, probably for Judge Isaac Parker's court, probably made most famous by the movie True Grit. You see that's a character in that most famous of Arkansas novels. He's a leading there and bringing stability and civilization back to the Indian Territory and to Arkansas, which was really in chaos after the Civil War. I see, at least in the public square, a lot of interracial cooperation there.
Mhm.
That kind of led me to kind of dig a little deeper. And I guess since I have the vantage point of being an active Freemason, I knew a lot of these guys were active in the Masonic Lodge. So that's really piqued my interest in kind of pursuing this further.
As we said, the Grand Lodge of Arkansas and the Prince Hall Masons worked together in the rebuilding of the state after the war. Was there any pushback from state or local politicians that were against this type of help from Masons, especially since both periods of the anti-Masonic movement, occurred during this time?
Yes. Well, we have the anti-Masonic movement very pronounced, particularly in the North in the 1830s, 1840s. 1850s. I don't see the anti-Masonic movement as prominent in places like Arkansas and so forth. Yet a lot of these leaders, or most of the leaders that I'm studying, are, I guess, what we call Yankee carpetbaggers. They're Northern Unionists who moved south after the war. There is, however, also a lot of Southern Unionists who are active in the Masonic Lodge and critical in Reconstruction, or as we call them, scalawags. Lafayette Gregg is a colonel. He's from Arkansas, but he joins the Union Army and becomes a colonel in Northwest Arkansas. He is one of the. He deeds his farm to the state of Arkansas to create Arkansas Industrial University, what is today the University of Arkansas at Fayetteville. It's on his land, and he's working very close with the African American leader Joseph Corbin, who, as a state superintendent of education, is chairman of the board of trustees of what becomes the University of Arkansas. He's later a founder of the historical Black College, what becomes University of Arkansas at Pine Bluff. And so you have two very prominent Freemasons, one Prince Hall, one from the Caucasian Lodge, working together to establish public education, not only public education, but also public higher education the first time in Arkansas, which is also very novel throughout the South. There's really no such thing as public schools in the former states of the Confederacy prior to the Civil War. You have the establishment of the Republican Party, so freedmen actively working in politics for the first time. You've got the establishment of public education in the South, and also in economic development in places like Pine Bluff, Arkansas, which is a major cotton center. It also has the Cotton Belt Railroad. Between 1865 and 1900, over 2,000 miles of track are laid in Arkansas. That's largely under Reconstruction governments. You have establishment of a lot of different institutions of higher education, both for freedmen as well as for whites. And you have something that's often forgotten. You have more African Americans migrating to Arkansas than any other state in the Union, North or South, between 1865 and 1900. Nearly 150,000 African Americans migrate to the state of Arkansas during that time. There's really a widespread availability of cheap, fertile land. We still have a lot. I live in the southeastern part of the state, which is very rural. We still have little pockets of African American communities throughout this area. But in that time period, you have a lot of Black-owned banks. You have black-owned, a lot of black land ownership in the 1870s, 1880s, 1890s. An ex-slave by the name of Wiley Jones, by the time he dies in 1905, is known as the wealthiest African American in the United States. He's in Pine Bluff and has his hand in a lot of different businesses. So it's a very interesting time, a lot of forgotten time in American history, that kind of being in this area. And again, from my particular vantage point, that I'm really discovering a lot of some new ideas.
Is there any plan for a follow-up article on your presentation when you go to the UK later this year?
Yes. Again, this is the second article. I published an article back in 2021. The Quatuor Coronati conference was canceled. It was supposed to be in Boston, and I was really disappointed. I had some really great anecdotes about Massachusetts soldiers being in Arkansas, but that's neither here nor there. But after this article is completed, which I'm focusing kind of some general observations regarding politics, education, and economic development, I'd really like to develop this into a full-length monograph. The first Grand Master of Prince Hall Freemasonry in Arkansas is a man by the name of William Gray. He's originally from Washington, D.C. As a young man, he was a valet for the governor of Virginia and a congressman, so he kind of mixed in elite political circles. He's very eloquent, but he goes to Pittsburgh. He's made a Mason in Ohio, which I need to do some more research there. Eventually makes his way to St. Louis. The Prince Hall Grand Lodge of Missouri is critical for this development. They use a lot of the rituals of the Ohio Grand Lodge, I think it was. I was looking at Art de Hoyos's great work on some of that. And that disseminates throughout the lower, or what we call the Trans-Mississippi West, the area west of the Mississippi River, quite quickly. But people like William Gray and Joseph Corbin is another very fascinating figure, very much a Renaissance man. I think the intellectual equal of Albert Pike in the 1870s and 80s, yet he's working through Prince Hall Freemasonry. I'd like to, take this further and work it into a full-length monograph, which I think would be I think there's a story to tell here.
Like and share this article, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel. If you wish to comment, please leave one, and as a reminder, hit the notifications bell. Any accompanying photographs or citations for this article can be found in the corresponding print edition. The Scottish Rite Journal is published by the Supreme Council of the Scottish Rite, Southern Jurisdiction, Mother Supreme Council of the World. Mark Dreisenstock, 32nd degree, KCCH, Managing Editor. I'm your host, Matt Bowers.